Good morning, everyone. It's an absolute pleasure to be here with Rahm. And from the perspective of many observers of American and global cities, we would say that under Rahm's leadership, Chicago has really been a vanguard of new localism. Economy shaping, talent preparing, dealing with the climate issue, dealing with placemaking questions. All of this is happening bottom up, multi-sector, interdisciplinary, and with leaders like the mayor of Chicago, cities are really able to step up. What I was hoping to do was to walk through an expansive definition of what smart cities are and really talk about how Chicago has taken a leadership role. Smart cities from a tech perspective, smart cities from a people perspective, smart cities from a finance perspective. So when you took office in 2012, right? 2011, one of your early initiatives was really around open data. And that set a platform for making Chicago a city that really was able to deploy technology to enhance efficiencies, reduce costs, make the cities more livable. So what would you regard as your proudest accomplishments, and what have you learned from this?
Well, on the proudest, it wouldn't be on the data side, but I'll get to that in a second. So for 5 years in a row, if you're asking me the proudest accomplishment, Chicago's graduation rate is 3.5 times the United States average every year for the last 5 years. We also now have set up, one, if you get a B average in high school, we're the only city that's done this, we make community college free. And it's the only public scholarship open to dreamers in the United States of America. And then if you keep a B average in community college, so it's Chicago Star Scholarship, and then we have Chicago Star Plus. If you keep the B average in community college, every university and college, all 17 in the city, offer you anywhere from 20 to 40% off of tuition. So kids can go to college literally for the cost of 1 year. And I think the biggest challenge for cities, global cities, is what I call inclusion. And a ticket post-high school is where you have to go educationally. And to me, we just had our cord ceremony. 600 kids in our community colleges are going on to 4-year institutions in the city of Chicago. I ran into one young man who told me he's now graduating from DePaul, has a job paying north of $100,000 a year, zero debt. Immigrant child. Game on. New York, Berlin, Boston. Because I don't think a family should have to take a second job or a second mortgage to give their children a chance at the American dream. None of us would be here if we didn't have two things in common: the love of our parents and a good education. You can't do something about one, but I can do something about two. And if you earn a B average, we make higher education affordable, accessible, and that's the way you give it. And 72% of the kids that take it, first ones in their family ever to go to college. And so to me, that the issue of inclusion, we can talk, and I'm here to talk about smart cities. If you cannot have people with the tools to access, it's just a good concept for a conference.
So I want to stick on this, because normally when you come to a Smart Cities conference, you never get to the people bit, right? Yeah. I mean, it's about this technology, that technology. But you've also had some other reforms in your high schools in the last year, and I thought it would be interesting to talk about that, and then we can get to some of the technology.
Well, there's a couple things we've done. So U.S. News World Report just came out with a report last night. In Chicago, of the 100 top high schools in the state of Illinois, 9 of the top 11 are in the city of Chicago. And one of them is a neighborhood IB school, International Baccalaureate. There's 2 on the south side, 2 on the far west side, so there's spread in the sense of equanimity across the system. Starting in 2019, 2 reforms. One, 50% of our kids will graduate high school with a college credit already under their belt. So if you've never been to college, no family's been there, having that access, that exposure, you're more likely to go to college by 90%. The second thing is what we call Learn, Plan, Succeed. Today, 44% of our kids go to college, just like the US number is 44% from high school. Another 20 go to community college. In the United States, it's 21. We're going to make sure everybody starting to graduate in the class of 2019-2020 and we'll support you. We've hired counselors and advisors. To get your high school diploma, you should need to produce a letter of acceptance from college, community college, a vocational trade, or a branch of the armed forces. Everybody, not just the Emanuel children or the Katz children, will have a post-high school education plan. If 2/3 to 3/4 of all jobs require a minimum of 2 years of post-high school education, what is we as a society doing to prepare our kids? And so, to me, in a race for talent and in a race for the 21st century, I gotta make sure every child, regardless of zip code, address, family background, or income, has the tools to succeed. So that's the biggest thing we have done, is make sure that high school is a milestone, not a destination.
So,
high school graduation, that is.
So just spend a little bit more time. Who are your partners in this? National government, like Elvis, it's left the building. Your state is usually number 50 out of 50 in terms of its performance. So how are you making this happen?
If this wasn't on media, I would say something. And I'm showing it a unique amount of restraint, which is unbelievable for me. So the community college system, we paid for about 20% of the kids that go to community colleges, we do remedial education. That has historically been true. So consider the budget around $600 million, about $39 million is paid there. So I took $5 million and redirected it to the B average Chicago Star Scholarship. So rather than insure for failure, I purchased and rewarded success. So I redirected the resources. The second is all the universities. I told, the idea actually, Chicago Star Plus, came from the UIC, University of Illinois, Chicago. And then I went door to door to all the universities. I said, I want you to sign up to a similar program. And all 17, let's just say we made them an offer they couldn't refuse. But they all signed up and did it. There's no federal, I mean, the best thing I can say about the federal is that they continued the Pell Grant, which are, a lot of these kids are Pell accessible. So that was the best way we've done it. Now, the other thing is, we have done things like P-Tech schools. So Sarah Good, which is on the south side of Chicago, is an IBM school. 8 kids last year, 23 this year, are graduating with their high school degree and their associate's degree, 2 degrees, out of high school. So they already have 2 years of post-high school education completed and certified. So we have 5 of those schools in the city: Microsoft, Motorola, IBM, and Cisco. And we're going to add another one in at the end of this school year.
So for those of folks in the audience who have not heard about these kind of innovations or initiatives, my sense is what's going to happen, we're going to capture it, we're going to codify it, and then cities across the United States are going to begin to adapt and adopt. If at whatever time the national government becomes sane and sensible again, maybe it'll scale at some other pace.
States, I mean, Oregon, Tennessee, there's a few other states are also, New York's got a version, are all trying to figure out access to higher education. And the mayor in Chicago, we have the 2nd largest community college system. I have appointed the chancellor and the board, so we made that policy. Absolutely. We could do that.
So let's shift to what would be the more routine conversation. You had a major announcement the other day about streetlights.
Yeah.
Why don't you walk through that, but also try to make a larger point about how cities are beginning to navigate this new technological possibility?
Well, let me say one thing about smart cities. My general view, if you look at city governments, we usually come in after it's a problem and then try to solve it, and it's expensive. My concept, our concept, is preventive, not dealing with on the back end. That's basically the mind frame. I want to address 2 ways we've looked at it. We did do, so we're doing all the street lights are going all LED, attached to a smart grid. So right now, you got to get a light fixed. Somebody watches it go out, it's the #1 call to 311, they got to call it in. We'll have a smart system attached to our LED light. We're saving $100 million in costs. It's attached to the smart grid and a system. We know when a light's about to go out, so we don't have to wait for it to go out. And we can send a crew out there to fix it in that effort. And to be honest, Gregor from Vancouver was here 5 years ago. He mentioned this at a conference in Chicago. This is my one moment I'm giving him. It's now my idea, but that actually came from, he has smart poles. Now we're also looking at on the top of the poles at small cells. So there's another innovation, another service we're going to provide. But that's going to save us $100 million a year. And in addition to the $100 million, in addition to having a smart system that is the first in the United States, certain neighborhoods may want the light to be dimmer. Other people want the lights to be much brighter. You'll be able to, rather than have one size for 360,000 streetlights across the city, you'll have diversity based on neighborhood, community, income. That's number one. The other thing we've done, and we're in the 16th month of this, so I'm not, April, we just announced our 14th straight month of declining shootings in the city of Chicago. In the districts, we have put a predictive analytics. So police districts are set up, if this gang shoots that gang, stop the second shooting. They're reactive. We're trying to stop the first shooting, so it's more proactive. In Englewood, which is on the south side of the city of Chicago, since we started in January of 17, they are down 68% in shootings. So it's not a statistical aberration. South Shore, which we started this year, January, is down 58%. Now, I'm not going to say anything until I get to past this summer, right. But it's attached to a shot spotter, camera, et cetera. But again, preventive, not reactive. And when I think of technology and investment in smart city, it's how do a city adapt what it does using data to get on the front end of a problem rather than on the back end. And I'll just give you a basic neighborhood services. We knew by data sets when we're going to have a rodent problem. Now you can either stop it before it becomes a problem, or we can wait for there's a problem, you get a bunch of 311 calls, and then you go in and try to pound the problem back into submission. And it's much cheaper to deliver a service on the front end than on the back end. So to me, when we think about, and let's be all honest in this room, at least it is for me, maybe it's not for you, what do we really mean by smart city? We're the biggest gatherer of data out there, municipalities. It's using that data we have access to, but we don't know how to organize, into delivering basic services and high-end services on a way that makes it much more efficient, much more responsive, in a much more cost-effective way than before. And cities are old industrial entities, which is, you got a problem, you throw weight. We don't have throw weight anymore. We don't have a federal partner. We don't have, in some cases, a state partner. And so we have to get better at using data, just like the private sector, and then delivering basic fundamental services in a more efficient, cost-effective way. And so we're looking at streetlights, public safety, neighborhood services, and in the other way, by offering the data up, which has been the most accessed is ours, people are looking at how a city functions from an air quality to a whole host of other activities.
Let me ask you a question about how you make this.
We're on a panel. You can ask me a question.
Right.
Okay?
About how you make this happen in your typical urban municipal government, right? So law enforcement in the United States probably 25 years ago began to embrace data, statistics, technology. In many cities, you would not say that about a lot of the other agencies that I presume were involved with, let's say, streetlights. So what are the kind of incentives you used, or force of personality, to get the municipal bureaucracy to embrace what is a radically different way of operating in many ways?
Let's just say I started this job 6'2" and 250 pounds, and I'm about 148 dripping wet now. Actually, you are right. The culture is the biggest attitude. And I'll give you one example. So in my first year, my first term, on our snow plows, I put snowplow tracker. So residents could check if a snowplow was coming down their street, or if you're cynical, some people may think that the snowplows would go down the mayor or the alderman's street before they got to their street. But basically to follow it. and then also to see not just where it is, but where is it heading. I had some people say, well, why would we do that? And I said, well, that's our customer, that person over there. We're giving them information to make their lives better because they may want to they may want to move their car, they may want to do, but the whole concept that you would share information and be transparent, that may be unique to Chicago, but I don't think it is. So there is that kind of concept culturally, and it's also, to be honest, yes, police departments, but if you even think of the CompStat model, that is after the fact and analysis of a pattern that's now established. We are trying to use data to get ahead of a pattern before it starts to become a pattern. Doesn't mean you get rid of all the other things. There's other use of data on knowing, obviously, using this for economic opportunities. So we have this thing called neighborhood opportunity funds. So for 5 years in a row, Chicago is the #1 city for corporate relocations. I mentioned to you inclusion when I talked about Chicago Star. There's obviously, New York has it, Baltimore has it, Chicago has it, Baltimore. Neighborhood vis-a-vis downtown. One part success, one part not. My view, it's really a tale of two investments, not so much a tale of two cities. So when a company moves in or a new building goes up, a new headquarters, new condos, et cetera, they pay into the Neighborhood Opportunity Fund. What we thought was going to be $10 million is on schedule this year for $45 million, which will go to about 450 to 500 businesses in the city, a $100,000 grant, no interest, nothing, to expand the coffee shop, to build a new restaurant, to do whatever you want to do, but the pillars of your retail economy in your neighborhood, that brings, so when McDonald's moved their headquarters to Chicago, 32 businesses across the city, each got about average $100,000. They're in 7 called opportunity zones, and they are the mainstay of that economy. And my attitude was to use that data to not encourage downtown development, but to make it the spur of venture capital for our neighborhood economy. And that's another concept. But that took a lot of pushing to get people to, both developers and others, to see that as a source of income.
Let me ask about the citizen response in Chicago. So you've been at this for a bunch of years now. We're dealing with a citizenry that is probably not the most technologically sophisticated in the world, but is a hell of a lot more sophisticated than they've been in the past, right? We're all walking around with smartphones, et cetera. Have they embraced the change? Are they part of the solution? Are complaints just, what has happened as you made the city more open in many respects?
Well, let me say this. So I want you, not all parts of the city, when you have a smart city and you're talking about what you guys are talking about, you have to both, I would admonish us all to think about it from an equity standpoint. Right. When everybody's talking about technology and being smart and so on and so forth, that's not, if you don't have a level of education, that's a problem.
Yep. And
then 2, you got to think about it from an access standpoint. Other cities have party splits. Ours is north-south, racial, ethnic. And so you have to think about distribution, access, and affordability to make sure everybody has access to that. And it's not, here you can do this by computer, it's all that smart. But yes, everybody has a smartphone, but the ability to, I'll give you an example. You can register online. So our park district system was rated, only big system to get the gold medal. You're on the north side, the central part of the city, northwest side or southwest side, our registration has jumped by about 100%, summer, fall, et cetera. But membership is not equally being distributed, even though we have a rule, no child gets turned away for cost. No child. And so there's a declining enrollment on the south and west side. Just because it's available technologically doesn't mean it's accessed through technology. And that means in different neighborhoods, different communities, you're going to have to work harder. And I just saw a company with a product here. We have 77 neighborhoods, 82 libraries. Places that we have always thought of as public need to be reinvigorated as public. So every neighborhood library in the city of Chicago has a teacher from 3 to 6 to do homework help. I guarantee you, if your kids need help, you'll figure out a tutor. What if you can't afford it? So our neighborhood library system is free tutoring for every child. We have online free tutoring in English and Spanish on any subject 12 hours a day. You have to use institutions that are about inclusion and about cohesion in accessing the public and capacity. Number one job trainer and online for jobs is the library computer system. Right. Libraries are becoming job training centers. You have to reinvent them to make them part of this, when we talk about smart cities, that access.
This is a very helpful conversation. I don't think that technology in the service of inclusion. I mean, we tend to think some of the policy responses of broadband access, but you're almost going through every part of what municipal government does and transforming it in the service of inclusion.
Here's my thing. If we don't think about how to, look, this should not come as a surprise. The world is being pulled apart by ethnicities, income, geography, access. If we don't use schools, parks, playgrounds, and transportation, public schools, public parks, public libraries, and public transportation to create cohesion and inclusion, then the model that we all believe in, or I assume we believe in, is over. And those tools have to be reinvigorated to bring not only people together, give people access. So when we rebuild, I'm proud, I mean, I tease Mayor de Blasio about this, but in Chicago, we have the 97% on-time arrival for public transportation. I take it 3 times a week. Our first build was on the south side. We closed the Red Line, and in 4.5 months built all 11 miles of new track, every station new, et cetera, because you cannot get to a job if your train's running 15 miles an hour. Number one issue about employment is not skills, access. And so you have to use the platforms of inclusion to give people access. And they have to be invigorated, not just invested in, although that's part of it, but invigorated with a new mission. Our libraries are doing that. I think our schools are on the process of doing that, and we're doing that with public transportation and parks.
So I flew in yesterday from Copenhagen. As always, it's one of the
It's a normal route for a smart city conference in New York. Right.
Well, but whenever you fly into the United States, you feel embarrassed, right? I mean, you come from a modern airport, and usually in Europe or Asia, and then you get to the land of the free. And so talk about infrastructure, and particularly aging infrastructure. Water, sewer.
Yeah.
I mean, to what extent has technology enabled us at least to price the problem?
Can I say one thing? Yeah. I know we're at a smart city, and this will probably get me thrown out of here. The goal is not technology.
Right.
Technology enhances what you're trying to get towards, but the technology is a means, not an end. And thank you. I think sometimes we all talk to each other and then we get enamored with the tool as if that's what we're about, and we're not about that. And, our L system, or our train, 2 years ago, we're the first system, and I think we're the only one right now, that has 4G on it. So when you go underground, you don't lose any access. I say this, but I mean it. I don't mean it just as a joke. The new office is the train. Employers want people working not when they show up at work, but on their way to work and on their way to home. Yeah. And again, the goal was not the 4G. The goal was keeping access and making sure Chicago stayed competitive. And the goal wasn't the in-person online tutoring, the technology. The goal was to access if Chicago, we have 140 languages spoken in our public schools. 83% of our kids are poverty or below. How do I ensure a recent immigrant child or a child of a recent immigrant family from Mexico or from any other part of the world access if you're writing a paper in 8th grade on the War of 1812? You're not going to turn to your parents. You're not going to turn to your uncle. And you're going to need help just like your kids need help on those papers. So the library becomes a partner to our school system. It's not a separate institution. And B, the technology adding that wasn't the goal. The goal was to make sure every child had access to the support they need to succeed educationally. So that's a big piece of what I call infrastructure.
By the way, if no one has tweeted the new office is the train, this is your time. But
No, don't do that.
Okay. You're going to attribute it to me.
Yeah.
So we have a couple more minutes, and I just want you to sort of give us your reflections on this thought. You worked in the White House under Bill Clinton. You were a member of the House of Representatives. You were the White House Chief of Staff for Barack Obama. You're now the mayor of one of the great cities of the world. Are we in a structural shift where people like yourselves really now bear responsibility for powering nations forward?
Well, look, I actually think, and I'm playing around with a book concept on this, we are witnessing, I think 20 years from now, when you look back through the rearview mirror, we're in an inflection point that the nation state as I knew it, grew up with, is in decline, creating voids. And the city state, a la Singapore, et cetera, is emerging as a new economic, intellectual, and cultural energy point. And I don't know whether it's 100 or not, but 100 global cities drive the economic, intellectual, and cultural energy of the world economy. The greater Chicago economy is the 21st largest economy in the world. With a little effort, I could join the G20, of which I've been to meetings and I don't have any interest in going to.
Right.
But that's how big it is.
Yeah.
We have 237 educational and cultural institutions in the city. We have the #1 aviation system, not only in the United States, best connected airport, #1, and 4th best in the world. So when you think about it, Chicago's economy, its cultural institutions, and its institutions of higher learning are internationally focused. It's the only global city in the heartland of America. And cities are stepping up, and this is not a fault, but every mayor prior to my tenure had control over the community college system. We've instituted the Chicago Star Scholarship. 20 years ago, that wouldn't have been thought of. It wouldn't have been thought of as requirement. 20 years hence, if we don't do it, your kids are not going to succeed. A mayor's responsibility today is not to high school, but to everything also. High school is a preparation for after the fact, and you then have to step in, and there's not going to be a new loan program from the federal government. There's not going to be a new training document from the federal government, and your state's basically got Medicaid and prisons. So you're going to have to do it. And we all learn. I just gave you the example from the mayor of Vancouver. Greg Fisher in Louisville has got a variation of the Chicago Star Scholarship in Louisville. Right. We're all going to figure this out, and we're going to notice 20 years from now, Brussels, DC, London are all stepping back, and the city of London, the city of Milan, the city of Paris, the city of Chicago, New York, LA, Tokyo, Beijing, Shanghai are going to be stepping in and doing things like, I didn't wait, and we were the only city with 2 coal plants operating in a city. And in 2012, we shut them down. And we're going to just step up like we did on the Chicago Charter on climate change with 68 cities, because you have to and you can't wait. And I think the clearest example, I led a delegation of every university in the city to Israel. Every university signed up a water agreement with a university in Israel. They have no water, we have Lake Michigan. Their research is on scarcity, ours is on abundance. We have a research partnership on water with Technion, Tel Aviv, Jerusalem, Haifa, every university. Did I call the Commerce Department of the United States? No. Did I call the State Department? Nobody's there, so no. Did I call and ask the CIA or the Department of Energy and effort? No. I told Northwestern, University of Chicago, IIT, UIC, come on with me, we're going to Israel, we're going to get agreements. Why? I know that water is the most precious commodity over the next 50 years. I want Chicago to dominate water technology and conversion and conservation, and I'm not waiting for the United States government, because for the next 50 years, they won't discover that we have a scarcity problem.
Last question. You've been a great mayor. Are you running for a third term?
Yeah, let me just say this. The job of mayor is better than chief of staff, Congress, and senior advisor all combined. It's not even close.
Boom.